Why does a man pull away precisely when his feelings are strongest? Why does he become emotionally unavailable when the connection reaches its deepest point? And why does this primarily occur with women he genuinely loves? Carl Jung devoted decades to examining the male psyche and uncovered something striking. Men don't run from difficult women. They don't flee from drama. They don't escape from complexity. They run from a single characteristic in a woman. And this characteristic is precisely what you consider your greatest strength. Most women don't understand what truly occurs inside a man when he withdraws emotionally. They believe he's not ready. They think he fears commitment. They assume he's emotionally immature. But Jung recognized the psychological truth behind this. A man who loves you deeply pulls away from you, not because he's cold or because he's unprepared for a relationship. He withdraws because you confront him with something he's suppressed his entire life. You activate in him a psychological mechanism that Jung called the most dangerous moment in a man's life. And here's the tragic part. Every relationship technique you've ever learned makes everything worse. Every piece of advice about giving him space, wrong. Every strategy about being mysterious, wrong. Every tip about letting him chase you, completely wrong. Because nobody explained the deep psychology truth about what really happens in his subconscious when he encounters a woman like you. Nobody told you why men avoid precisely the women who touch them most deeply. Nobody explained why your emotional authenticity frightens him, and nobody showed you that what you consider your flaw is actually your greatest psychological power. Jung discovered that there exists a characteristic in certain women that men unconsciously fear. Not because this characteristic is bad, but because it's so powerful that it forces a man to face his own interior. And most men aren't prepared for this. In the next minutes, you'll understand what happens in a man's psyche when he meets a woman who possesses this specific characteristic. You'll learn why he withdraws, even while loving you. Perhaps precisely because he loves you. You'll comprehend the Jungian perspective that explains why emotional intensity generates distance in men. And you'll discover a psychological technique that changes everything. Not to manipulate him, not to play games, but to finally understand what truly goes through his head when he shuts down emotionally. But I must warn you, this discovery will hurt, because you'll understand that he's not running from you. He's running from the man he would need to become by your side. He's fleeing from the very emotional depth that you awaken in him. And the paradox is, the more authentic you are, the more you show your true self, the more he's confronted with his own incompleteness. Jung called this mirroring of the unconscious. You reflect back to him everything he hasn't integrated within himself. And this is the reason he keeps his distance from you. Not because you're too much, not because you're too intense, not because you're too emotional, but because you're complete, and his incompleteness becomes unbearable in your presence. So if you're ready to understand why men distance themselves from precisely the women they love most, let's dive into what Carl Jung discovered about the male psyche and what no woman has ever told you about deep masculine psychology. Before we continue, I want you to do something important. If what I just described touched you deeply, if you recognize that you're exactly this woman who confronts men with her completeness, then write a single word in the comments now. Mirror. Why is this so important? Jung discovered that transformation doesn't happen only through understanding, but through conscious action. By writing this word, you activate a psychological process within yourself. You declare to your subconscious, I'm ready to see the truth. I'm ready to understand what's really happening. This simple ritual, writing mirror, is the first step toward integrating this discovery. It's as if you're making a contract with your own unconscious. Jung called this conscious participation in one's own individuation process. Most women consume information passively. They watch videos, nod their heads, think interesting, and then nothing changes in their lives. But the women who truly transform, who radically change their relationship dynamics, are those who participate actively, who act consciously, who signal to the universe, "I'm not here merely to listen. I'm here to transform myself." When you write mirror in the comments, 3 things happen on a psychological level. First, you confirm to yourself that this discovery is true. You validate your own experience. Second, you send a message to your unconscious that you're ready to accept this power in you, that you no longer believe you're too much or too intense. Third, you connect with thousands of other women here in this community who are going through exactly the same thing, who understand what it means to confront a man with your authenticity, who know what it's like to be loved and avoided simultaneously. Look at the comments. See how many women have already written mirror. These are the women who understand. These are the women who are no longer victims of their relationship dynamics, but conscious creators of their reality. And here's the power. When you write mirror, you program your brain to be more attentive to the signs in your own love life. You'll begin to recognize when you're activating his anima. You'll understand when he's fleeing from his own depth. Conscious observation is the difference between women who live the same patterns repeatedly and women who break through and create deep and true connections with men who are ready for integration. So write mirror in the comments now. Not for me, not for this channel, but for yourself, as a declaration to the universe that you're ready to see the truth and accept your psychological power. Do this now, before we continue, because what I'm going to show you next will only work for women who have already taken this first conscious step. Women who merely watch passively will hear the technique, but it won't anchor in their subconscious. But for the women who wrote mirror, everything that follows will have a deep psychological resonance. So are you ready? Great. If you wrote mirror, then you're ready for what comes now. Let me first explain something about the male psyche that most women don't know and that most men don't understand about themselves. Carl Jung discovered that every man carries within himself a feminine element. He called this the anima. This isn't metaphorical, it's not symbolic. It's a real psychological mechanism that exists in every man. Anima is everything that a man perceives in himself as feminine and therefore repressed from his conscious self, his emotions, his vulnerability, his longing for deep connection, his capacity to feel instead of merely thinking. From the moment a boy hears "boys don't cry," or "be a man," or "don't be weak like that," he begins to separate parts of himself. These parts don't disappear, they sink into his unconscious. They become his anima. And here it gets fascinating, this repressed anima. He projects onto women, especially onto women he loves, but not onto all women equally. Most women activate his anima superficially. They play a role, present a version of femininity that's socially acceptable. His persona interacts with her persona, and everything remains on the surface. These relationships seem safe to him, comfortable, controllable, but then he meets you and you're different. You don't play a role. You're not merely feminine in a performative way. You're authentically integrated emotionally. You've reached your own completeness, or at least you're on the path toward it. Jung would say you've advanced in your own individuation. You're not just persona, not just mask. You're connected with your true self. And precisely here lies the problem, because when a man encounters a woman who is truly complete, something devastating happens in his psyche. His own anima isn't just lightly activated, it's completely awakened. He sees in you everything he repressed in himself, all the emotions he could never feel, all the vulnerability he had to hide, all the longing for depth that he dismissed as weakness. You become the living mirror of his own unlived soul. And this is the moment when fear sets in. Most women interpret this fear incorrectly. They think, he fears commitment, he's not emotionally available, he hasn't gotten over his ex. He has intimacy issues. All wrong. What really happens is much deeper. He fears himself, the parts of himself that you bring forth in him. Jung called this the encounter with one's own anima, and described it as one of the most frightening and simultaneously most transformative moments in a man's life. Why frightening? Because when a man encounters his anima, he must admit, I'm not who I thought I was. I'm not only logic, control, strength, I'm also emotion, vulnerability, longing. And for a man who spent his entire life maintaining a masculine persona, for a man who learned that success means emotional control, for a man whose entire identity was built upon being strong, this realization is existentially threatening. That's why he pulls away. Not because he doesn't love you, but because he loves you too much, because you confront him with a version of himself that he hasn't yet integrated. And here's the tragic irony. The more he loves you, the more you activate his anima. The more you activate his anima, the more you confront him with his incompleteness. The more he's confronted with his incompleteness, the more fear he feels. And the more fear he feels, the more he distances himself. This is the psychological mechanism that almost no woman understands. And now comes the part that changes everything. Most relationship advice you've ever received works against this mechanism instead of working with it. They told you, give him space. But giving space means in his psyche, she confirms that I'm right to be afraid. She accepts my distance. She doesn't challenge me. This doesn't bring healing. This only confirms that he can continue fleeing from himself. They told you, be mysterious, let him chase you. But mystery only works with men whose anima hasn't been truly activated, with men who still live in superficial projections, with a man whose anima you awakened he can't chase. He's too busy fleeing from himself. They told you, don't show too much emotion, stay calm. But precisely your emotional authenticity was what touched him deeply from the beginning. If you now start playing a role, if you start staying calm instead of authentic, you lose exactly the quality that attracted him to you originally. Jung would say, you descend from your individuation back to the persona and thereby become like all other women, safe but meaningless. So what's the solution? How do you navigate this impossible situation where your greatest strength, your emotional completeness, is simultaneously what drives him away? This is what I'm going to show you now, but first, you need to understand. There are 3 types of men, and each reacts differently to a woman like you. The first type is the man who's still deeply trapped in his persona. He's buried his anima so deep that he doesn't even know it exists. When you activate his anima, he runs and doesn't return. This man isn't ready for transformation. The second type is the man who has awareness of his anima, but fears it. He pulls away, but returns in cycles. He wants to be with you, but can't. He loves you, but fears what you awaken in him. This man is on the edge of transformation, but needs something specific from you. The third type is the man who has already begun the individuation process, who knows his anima, who has integrated his emotions. This man doesn't flee. He approaches you because of your depth, not despite it. The question is, which type are you dealing with? And more importantly, what do you do when you're confronting the second type? The man who loves you but flees, who returns but distances himself again, who feels but closes off. This is what we're going to explore now, because the Jungian answer isn't give up, and it's also not chase him. It's something much more powerful. It's the understanding that you can't be his therapist, but you can be his mirror. And there's a specific way to do this that changes everything. Keep following, because what I'm going to show you next will give you a completely new perspective on what's going through his head and how you navigate this complex psychological dynamic without losing your own strength. Now it gets practical because theory is beautiful, but you need concrete signs that tell you, yes, I activated his anima. Yes, he's fleeing from himself, not from me. Jung described 3 specific behaviors that a man shows when his anima has been awakened by a woman. And if you recognize these 3 signs, then you know for certain you're not the problem. You're the catalyst for something that needs to happen in him. First sign, the spiral of idealization and distancing. A man whose anima is activated will simultaneously idealize you and distance himself from you. He'll say things like, "You're different from all other women. I've never felt this way with anyone. You understand me in a way no one else understands." But then, often the next day or the next week, he withdraws emotionally, becomes cold, distant, inaccessible. Most women think, "What did I do wrong? Yesterday everything was perfect and today he ignores me." You did nothing wrong. What happened was that his anima projection became so strong that it frightened him. Jung explained it this way. When he idealizes a woman, he projects all his unlived anima onto her. He doesn't see just a woman, he sees the goddess, the muse, the perfect feminine essence. And that's too much, because he unconsciously recognizes, if she's so perfect, then I'm not good enough for her. If she's so complete, it confronts me with my incompleteness. So he needs to distance himself to reduce the intensity of the projection. This isn't manipulation. It's not a game he's playing with you. It's a psychological protection mechanism. He's trying to stabilize his psyche. But here's what's important. If he returns repeatedly, if he distances himself but then seeks contact again, this is a sign that he unconsciously wants you to help him integrate his anima. He just doesn't know how to ask you for this. Second sign, emotional overload. He says things like, "You awaken so much in me, I don't know what you're doing to me. When I'm with you, I feel things I can't control." Most women hear this and think, "Oh, how romantic," or "Oh no, I'm too much for him." Both are wrong. What he's really telling you is, "You're activating my shadow side." The shadow side in Jungian psychology isn't evil. It's simply all the parts of us that we repressed because we thought they were unacceptable. For men, the shadow side is often linked to emotions, to vulnerability, to the need for true intimacy, not just physical, but of the soul. When he says, "I feel things I can't control," he's confessing, "My entire psychological defense system is crumbling in your presence. This is immense. This doesn't happen with just any woman. This only happens when a woman is so authentic that she penetrates through his persona and touches his soul directly." But here's the problem. Most women react to this declaration with even more emotion. They try to calm him, hold him, reassure him. "It's okay, I'm here for you." And this makes everything worse. Why? Because the moment you try to save him emotionally, you confirm his deepest fear. "I'm weak. I need her. I've lost control." And a man who believes he's lost control will only do one thing: fight to regain it. And the easiest way to regain control is to distance himself emotionally. So when he tells you that you overwhelm him emotionally, acknowledge it but don't chase him. Jung would say, let him go through his own individuation. You can be witness, but not savior. Third sign, the cycles of closeness and flight with a specific pattern. This is the most subtle but most revealing sign. He approaches, the connection becomes deep. You have moments of real intimacy, not just physical but emotional. He opens up, shares things he normally doesn't share. And then, exactly at the moment when it's deepest, he withdraws. But, and this is crucial, he doesn't withdraw completely. He doesn't disappear, he just becomes superficial. He still texts you, but the messages are short. He still sees you, but the conversations stay on the surface. He's physically present, but emotionally absent. Jung would describe this as retraction to the persona. He flees back to his mask, to his socially acceptable version of himself, because the true version, the version you saw, seems too dangerous to him. But here's what's fascinating. If you pay attention, you'll notice that in these moments, he's testing. He's testing whether you accept his persona or whether you want him in his totality. Most women don't understand this test. They try to recover the deep connection. They ask, "What's happening?" Or "Why are you so distant?" Or "Do we have a problem?" And this is the worst thing you can do, because you're showing him, "I need you to be emotionally available for my well-being." And this confirms his fear. If I open up, she'll depend on my emotional availability. That's too much responsibility. I need to protect myself. The Jungian response is radically different. Acknowledge his retraction. Respect it, but don't lose your own depth. This means you don't adapt to his superficiality. You don't become superficial too to make him feel safe. You remain complete, remain authentic, remain connected with your own depth, but don't demand that he be there with you. This is the difference between being needy and being a mirror. Being needy means, "Come back to the depth, I need this from you." Being a mirror means, "I'll stay here in the depth. When you're ready to return, you know where to find me." And here the magic happens. A man whose anima is activated can't stay in superficiality for very long when he knows that depth is available. It's like an addict who knows where the source is. He can try to stay away, can try to convince himself he doesn't need it, but his soul hungers for the integration that's only possible through this connection. So he returns, not because you chased him, not because you manipulated him, but because his own psyche forces him to return. And each time he returns, he goes a little deeper, integrates a little more, becomes a little more complete. This is the individuation process through relationship that Jung described. But now it gets critical. This only works if you yourself don't get lost in the process. If you begin to abandon your own completeness to keep him, if you start hiding your authenticity to make him feel safe, if you start taking his cycles personally instead of seeing them as his psychological process, then you lose exactly the quality that could transform him. That's why understanding these 3 signs is so powerful. They give you the psychological distance to recognize this isn't about me. This is his process, and I can be witness without losing myself in it. But here's the million-dollar question I hear constantly from women. Okay, now I understand what's happening with him. I recognize the signs, but how long do I wait? How long do I remain being the mirror before accepting that he may never be ready? This is the right question, and the answer isn't what you expect, because Jung had a very specific perspective on when a woman should stay and when she should leave. And this is what I'm going to show you now in the final part. Here's the truth nobody tells you. Not every man who activates his anima is ready for the transformation this requires. And the most dangerous trap a woman like you can fall into is believing that if I just wait long enough, if I'm just patient enough, he'll make it. Jung was very clear about this. Individuation cannot be forced. It can only be chosen. You can show a mirror to a man, can show him what's possible, can demonstrate through your own completeness what integration looks like, but you can't force him to follow the path. And here's the part that hurts, but is essential. There are men who prefer to remain in their fragmented existence rather than face the fear that comes with real completeness. Jung called this the hero's refusal to answer the call. These men will pull you into cycles repeatedly. They'll approach, pull away, return, disappear again, but will never really stay. Not because they don't love you, but because love for you forces them to love themselves. And that's something they can't do. So how do you recognize the difference? How do you know if you're dealing with a man who's in a real individuation process or with a man who just circles infinitely in his own fears? Jung gave us 3 criteria. Criterion 1, movement, not stagnation. A man in real individuation, perhaps slowly, perhaps with setbacks, perhaps with fear, but he moves. This means each time he returns, he's a little more open, a little more honest, a little more vulnerable. He doesn't fight as hard against his own emotions anymore. He begins to find words for what's happening inside him. He shows you progressive integration, even if it's painful for him. But a man who's just stuck in cycles, he returns to exactly the same point. The same patterns, the same fears, the same retractions. Nothing changes. He doesn't learn. He doesn't grow. He just repeats. And here's what's important. You're not his therapist. It's not your job to guide him through every step. It's not your responsibility to show him how to integrate his anima. Your only job is to remain authentic and observe whether he's doing his own work. If after 6 months, a year, 2 years, he's still going through the same cycles without real change, then this isn't individuation. This is resistance to individuation. And you can't save a man who refuses to save himself. Criterion 2, self-reflection, not projection. A man who's truly ready for transformation eventually begins to take responsibility for his own patterns. He says things like, "I know I pull away when it gets too intense. I'm working on this. I recognize that my fear of intimacy has to do with my own history, not with you. I understand that I'm running from myself, not from you." This is a man who's beginning to integrate his shadow side. He doesn't hold you responsible for his feelings, doesn't project his fears onto you. He recognizes that the conflict is within him, but a man who's not ready always blames you. "You're too intense. You demand too much. You drive me crazy. I can't think when I'm with you." See the difference? In the first case, he takes responsibility for his inner world. In the second case, he projects his inner world onto you and makes you the problem. Jung was very clear. Projection is the opposite of individuation. A man who constantly projects is a man who's fleeing from his own psyche, and you can't go there for him. Criterion 3, he seeks his own answers. This is the most subtle sign, but perhaps the most important. A man in real transformation begins to actively seek answers. He reads, reflects, talks with friends, perhaps goes to therapy, perhaps begins to confront his own psychological patterns. He takes his individuation into his own hands. You don't need to explain to him what anima means, don't need to teach Jungian concepts. He finds his own path, his own words, his own understanding, but he shows you through his actions. "I know something in me isn't right, and I'm willing to look at it." A man who's not ready wants you to give him the answers, wants you to tell him how he should feel, wants you to do the emotional work for him. And that's exhausting, because real transformation can't be delegated. Each person needs to find their own path to completeness. So if you apply these 3 criteria to the man in your life, what do you see? Do you see movement or stagnation? Do you see self-reflection or projection? Do you see active self-development or passive expectation that you'll fix him? Be radically honest with yourself, because here's the last Jungian truth I want to share with you. Your completeness is non-negotiable. You're not in this world to be a man's mirror at the cost of your own soul. You're not here to wait patiently while he stays stuck in infinite cycles. You're not here to sacrifice your own individuation for his potential individuation. Jung said, "The greatest tragedy isn't that people don't reach their completeness. The greatest tragedy is that they give up their completeness for the illusion of connection." And this is what I see repeatedly. Women who are so powerful, so complete, so authentic, who betray their own depth because they believe that this way they can keep a man who's not ready to enter his own depth. And you know what happens in the end? He respects them less, because unconsciously he knows, she gave up her strength for me, and if she can do that, perhaps her strength was never real. This is the cruel paradox. The more you try to keep him by giving up your completeness, the less he'll be attracted to you, because it was your completeness that attracted him in the first place. So here's the Jungian technique that changes everything. Remain complete. Let him choose. This doesn't mean indifference, doesn't mean emotional coldness. It means I'm here in my total depth, in my total authenticity. If you're ready to meet me there, I'll be present. But I won't leave my depth to meet you in your superficiality. This is radical fidelity to yourself. And here's the power. Men who are ready for individuation are attracted to this clarity. Men who aren't ready are repelled by it. And that's perfect. Because you don't want just any man. You want the man who's ready to follow the path. Jung called this the alchemical marriage, the union of two souls who have both reached their own completeness. This isn't something you can force. It's something that happens when two people take their individuation seriously. So the question isn't, how do I keep him? The question is, how do I remain complete while giving him space to find his own path? And the answer is simpler than you think. Live your life. Pursue your individuation. Remain connected with your own depth. If he's truly the right one, if he's truly ready for transformation, his own soul will pull him back to you. Not because you manipulated him, not because you waited patiently, but because two souls on the path to completeness recognize each other. And if he doesn't return, then he gave you the greatest gift. He freed you to find the man who is ready. Because believe me, there are men out there who have already integrated their own anima, who know their shadow side, who take their individuation seriously. And these men are looking for exactly a woman like you. A woman who doesn't flee from her own depth. A woman who lives her completeness, doesn't just talk about it. A woman who understands that true love doesn't mean diminishing yourself.